morning we have with us an alumnus in the class of 1975, Jamie Osborne. Jamie arrived at Avon as a freshman in the fall of 1971. That's my first year as a teacher here at Avon. He was one of those guys that broke me in. There's some other guys in the front row who do the same thing. Thank you. Jamie was a hard-working and highly respected achiever at Avon. He was a monitor, played varsity soccer, varsity baseball. He was a strong student, graduating with cum laude honors. Several of Jamie's classmates and lifelong friends came here to hear him speak today, and they traveled long distances to do so, as far as Seattle. This is the Avon Brotherhood in action. For most of his 60-year life, Jamie has been a recreational enthusiast, participating in numerous sports activities, from rowing, crew, skiing, camping, climbing, canoeing, golfing, running, squash, tennis, soccer, and baseball. He had a successful, upwardly mobile professional career in informational technology management. He has two children, Kevin, 29, Elena, 23, and just celebrated his 37th year of marriage to his wife, Diane. Tragically, in 2007, Jamie was involved in a road cycling accident while riding with friends when his bicycle frame collapsed underneath him. He was driven headfirst into the pavement at 25 miles an hour. The central cord of his spine sustained severe damage in the cervical area, rendering him an incomplete quadriplegic. Jamie will recount his life-free injury, the accident, and his relentless, hard-fought recovery over the last 10 years to regain independence. His story will offer hope and inspiration to anyone suffering from some form of life adversity. Remember today's lesson. Jamie is a newly minted author, having published last February his first book entitled Will Your Way Back: How One Man Overcame Tragedy with a Winning Mindset. It is an inspirational memoir that embodies our school's motto, Aspirando et perseverando. The book is very personal, raw, and relatable, as you will hear in today's presentation, as he takes all of us on a journey of ups and downs, highs and lows, triumphs and tragedies. His recovery approach provides penetrating insights and a profound learning opportunity for all of us. Since the book's publication, Jamie has presented in over 35 venues from live radio, a local NBC affiliate TV program, podcasts, blog posts in the UK, Canada, and Australia, local magazines, public libraries, bookstores, and newspapers, Young Presidents Organization, medical conferences, and last April, a TED Talk event. Please join me in welcoming Jamie Osborne.
Peter, thank you very much for that very kind and welcoming introduction. I'd also like to express my thanks to Dean Brian Doyle and others that have helped put this event together today. As Peter mentioned, I'm going to take you through a little bit of my life's journey, Jamie's story, what it was like when I was hurt and the 10 years that have followed, to regain so much lost function as a result of the paralysis that I live with every day. The presentation will go about an hour, perhaps an hour 10, and give you an opportunity to ask some questions at the end. My journey, as Peter mentioned, is embedded, really foundational to my whole journey recovery around those two words that we all know so well, aspirando et perseverando. To persevere and to prevail. And I believe that you'll see a lot of that as I take you through this journey. Before before I do that, I'd just like to take a quick moment to pay tribute to a couple of my fellow classmates that sadly are no longer with us today. On your left is Bill Angel. Bill lost his fight to cancer just recently. And Richard Woody Woodwell, a very dear and close friend of many of us, unimaginably and tragically was lost on 9/11. It's a great pleasure to have his wife here, Linda. And I think you're all familiar with the Woodwell Leadership Award that was created and dedicated to honor Woody. There have been other classmates, sadly, that we've lost from our class of 1975. The thing that I really wanted to point out here, which Peter also mentioned, is the brotherhood. It's not lost on me, and I don't think it's lost on any of our class members. The brotherhood is really not the specific domain to a particular class or a series of classes of Avon. It really transcends all generations, all Avonians that have walked through these hallowed halls. And these relationships that we form, these bonds that we formed over time, are durable and life-lasting. Just a quick thing about Jamie. Who is Jamie Osborne? I grew up in a family of 5. I was the second youngest. To my right is my brother Rob, who's here today. Rob is a past alum of Avon, graduated in 1973. Past warden. My brother Tom, who's up above, is here today also, drove down from the state of Maine with his lovely wife Kyle and daughter Jessica. And then bookending our family is my younger sister Allison and my older sister Molly. My father, Tom Osborne, was an alum here at Avon as well. Back in the 1940s, he served on the board for a period of time in the 70s, and sadly, we lost my father back in 1987. So Avon is very much in the Osborne blood. Sports. Peter read a whole parade of different sports activities that I like to do. I'm an enthusiast. Am I really good at any particular sport? I wouldn't say so, but I love just being athletic. I love the competition, the camaraderie of the different sports that I've played. When I first came out of Avon, yes, I played some sports here. I went on to Ithaca College in upstate New York, where I got involved in rowing. I rowed on the crew team there for 3 years. A crew, in many ways, changed my whole life's trajectory. To be perfectly candid, when I was at Avon, it was a very formative time for me in my life. I'll admit that growing up for me wasn't easy. I didn't really have a good self-esteem. I struggled with my own self-confidence. Tried to find a way to fit in, but I still struggled. And when I came to Ithaca College, my first year, to be honest, was kind of a blur. But then I got exposed to rowing, and all of the effort and the competition, the training, the anaerobic and aerobic training that goes into rowing was so compelling to me, and it just changed everything about how I approached my life. Rowing gave to me something that had been missing. I always felt like I wasn't good enough. And in rowing, I found that I was a pretty decent rower over time. And we had a pretty decent boat as we went through our junior year and our senior year. And that put in motion a whole life trajectory in terms of fitness and exercise as I grew into my mid and later adult years. And would prove to be very useful and beneficial as I figured out how to cope with the devastation of this injury. This picture here was shot back in 2004, on a ride in the French Alps. This particular climb is going up, if you've ever watched the Tour de France, this is coming up a climb called the Alpe d'Huez, which is probably one of the most recognized climbs in France. And there's just nothing like the elation of climbing up 4,000 feet at 6 o'clock in the morning and raising our bikes over our head in total excitement. I couldn't get enough of it. Which brings me to June 14th of 2007. That fateful day. Go ahead and play it. I'm going to take you on the segment of the ride that just preceded my injury. We had just ascended, I was on a group ride, let me just back up a second. We were on a group ride together with about 10 of us. We used to ride in the lunch hour all the time. And on this particular ride, it was a very competitive, aggressive day. Lots of attacks and counterattacks, lots of cycling strategies at work, and here we're on a descent. This is a 20-degree gradient, so it's very, very steep. The cyclist that I was with had passed me because I was a terrible descender. I had my hand on the brakes going down most of the way, but the others were going 55 miles an hour down this descent. I wasn't that brave, and so I got passed. And a slight gap had formed between the riders ahead of me and myself. And as we're just coming down to the tail bottom of this hill, you'll see that we'll come to a flat section of the ride. Now these were very competitive, and so we're playing all the games you play in typical cycling strategies. And when this gap had formed, I knew I was in trouble in terms of trying to rejoin the group. And as we come to the bottom of the descent here, we'll come onto a flat section that parallels right along the river. So as we're approaching this turn, I'm doing everything I can to bridge up to the group that's in front of me. I had about 100 yards to bridge up. And I'm really at my maximum anaerobic effort. I was like totally hypoxic at this point, almost out of body. And as we come right around this turn, I just managed to rejoin the group. And right when that moment happened, and you can see a sign right on the right, and then there's a little simulation here of me going down. And the next recollection I had was looking straight up at the trees and the sun glistening through the branches, and I go to myself, oh my goodness, I'm the one who's down. And then I just remember feeling this incredible, incapacitating pain. And here's what happened. This is a racing bike, weighs about 16 pounds, it's aluminum. It's built to go fast. And as you can see, it's just like somebody took a saw and just sawed the front half of the bike off from the back half of the bike. And all I knew is that I'm bombing along, trying to catch up to the group. I rejoin, and the next thing I remember is this loud, crunching, crumbling, metallic noise. And then I had this sensation of falling. And the next recollection I had was looking up in the trees. So up at the geometry of the bike, this section right here is called the main triangle frame. And you can see that the top tube's severed, and then the diagonal tube, which is generally where the bottle cages are kept, is completely dismembered from the bike. You can't see the breakdown below, but that's completely dismembered. So it actually fractured in 3 places. I never had a chance, and I never knew what was coming. This is very subtle, but this is an MRI picture taken of me the day of the accident after I was quickly moved up to a level 1 trauma center in Seattle. And this MRI is just a vertical shot going right down from top to bottom. And the level of injury, if you were like to touch the back of your neck and you can feel like a little knob, in the back of your neck. Feel that? So my level of injury is just above that, in the cervical spine. So your cervical spine, head, your joints are thoracic, just below that. So the central cord, just to give you a little bit of an anatomy here, is basically your nerve signal highway. It transmits billions of signals from your brain to your extremities, your internal organs. It tells everybody what to do, and 99% of the time you never think about it. It just happens. So this injury is called a central cord injury. And that little white cloudy space you see within the circle is where the damage is in my spinal cord. What does that mean? It means I have paralysis from this level. This is a typical C7 level injury, all the way down to my toe. It's just like if you took a line and took it right across my elbows, my mid-chest, and my other elbow. I'm paralyzed. I have constant numbness from these three fingers right up the middle of my arm to my elbow. And it's symmetric on both sides. Now I have also what's called an incomplete central cord injury. And I'll just simply explain the difference between complete and incomplete. So if that central cord is a pipe, I try to analogize it this way. Think of your central cord as an 8-lane highway. In my case, 6 of those lanes are blocked. And they'll never become unblocked. Why? Because nerve cells in your central cord don't behave like every other cell in your body. Like if you cut yourself, break an arm, the body knows how to heal itself. Nerve cells in your central cord, when they're damaged, they're programmed to do just the opposite. They're programmed to self-destruct. Or at a minimum, to wall off or resist attempts at repair. But being an incomplete means I still have 2 lanes that are open. And that provides a possible options for me to gain or regain lost function. When I was first admitted to the hospital, this is all I could do. I had 0 hand function. None. No movement from here down. That's where I started. It was like somebody had pressed the Control-Alt-Delete button on my life's keyboard. Everything was reset. It was a complete physicality reset. Everything was initialized. Complete startup. The 5th night in the hospital, I'd been moved out of intensive care after they had done a number of countermeasures to get me stable again. And then they admitted me into the inpatient rehabilitation department where I spent the next 5.5 weeks. That night, I lay there by myself, incapacitated with pain, sweating profusely. I mean, I was just drenching the sheets underneath me. My mind was a jumbled mess of emotions. I was sad, despondent, freaked out, lost, sad, depressed, angry, livid. I mean, how does a main triangle frame of a road bicycle, the supposed strongest part of the bike, how does it just collapse? I couldn't make sense of it. And I realized that my life had come to a fork in the road. Which way was I going to go? If you've ever watched the movie Castaway with Tom Hanks, you'll remember this scene right at the end of the movie where he's trying to figure out what path he's going to take. For me, it was like, okay, Jamie, you're at a crossroads, guy. Where are you going to go? You going to let this thing win? Defeat you, succumb and surrender? Because I'm telling you, there wasn't one cell in my body that wanted to do anything. Nothing. It was screaming at me to just be idle. Because to do anything, I knew I was going to pay a big price. Or, on the other hand, I could choose to fight the good fight. Do everything in my power to do what it takes, for as long as it takes. And then that same night, I reflected back on the chat that I'd had with my doc. And my doc had said to me, Jamie, you need to choose. Get independent. Get independent. And he implored me to go that direction. And I thought about it some more, and then the light bulb went off. I got it. There was my vector. There was my North Star. It was my choice. And I decided that night, I chose that night to fight the good fight, to do everything in my power not to be enabled by anyone or anything. I didn't want somebody to have to feed me. I didn't want somebody to have to dress me. I didn't want somebody to have to take care of my personal hygiene. I did not want to live my life in a wheelchair. And that choice, that night, to get independent, has guided every step of my recovery for the last 10 years, and still does today and will tomorrow. That's the direction I'm going. I am not turning back. I am not looking behind me. I am not looking in the rearview mirror. I'm not going to second guess myself. That's the direction I'm going. That, in our motto, is aspire. With unwavering commitment, determination, and resolute effort. When I was admitted to the hospital, my doctors had told me, all my practitioners had told me, you know, Jamie, with this nature of injury, the steepest trajectory of recovery that you're going to have is going to be in the first 6 months. And then after 6 months, your recovery trajectory is going to start to flatten out. And you're going to reach maximum recovery after about 2 years. That was a commonly held belief in these effective medical specialties. And for me, it created this huge sense of urgency. Like, I am never going to get these 6 months back again, so I got to go all out. And I did go all out. My wife has been a tremendous gift. She was taking me to appointments every week after I was discharged. 6, 8. I think our high water mark was like 12 appointments one week. I was pushing and pushing and pushing to gain back as much functional recovery as I could, because I wasn't going to have this opportunity again. I wasn't going to have another first 6 months again. But here's the thing. I violated the main tenet that my occupational therapy had said to me while I was in the hospital. She had said to me, Jamie, there's 4 things you need to remember with this injury. You got to plan, you got to prepare, you got to prioritize, and you got to pace yourself. Oh, Jamie, he didn't pace himself at all. I did exactly the opposite. When there was an opportunity to rest, I should have rested, but I didn't. And this is what happened. I crashed again. But this time, it was a mental crash. You see, I was pushing my body so hard that I almost drove myself off a cliff. I had made such great progress in those first few months. My doctors were looking at me like I was the poster kid for spinal cord injury recovery. I was able to ambulate with arm-assisted crutches. I could walk around my neighborhood for a kilometer. And then all of a sudden, my whole symptom profile changed. Now I could barely walk to the bathroom. All of a sudden, I'm feeling these muscles constriction and seizing. Just muscles just cramping up like this. And I couldn't make sense of it. All this great forward progress I had made, and now I'm going backwards. And that scared me. It frightened me. And that fear turned into sadness. And that sadness turned into depression. And then that depression turned into suicidal thoughts. I felt like I was in this cavern, bottomless cavern, and I was falling. And I just wanted somebody to catch me. And I just lay on the couch. My wife was beside herself trying to do things to try and help me get out of this hole. I didn't want to go back to my doctors because I was ashamed. I was embarrassed. There's Jamie Osborne making all this great progress. And now he's going backwards. I finally did go in to see my doctor, and there I was, sitting on that bed, sobbing like a baby. And I just asked him one simple question: Doc, am I going to be okay? And he said, yeah, Jamie, you're going to be okay. And I didn't really care about the words he said. I wanted to know what his body language told me. Did he really believe what he was saying? Climbing out of that hole has taken a long time. And there's a number of factors that allowed me to climb out of that hole. One, and the most important, has been the love and support of my wife and my family. Two, I finally got myself plugged into something I should have plugged myself into right out of the hospital, which was mental health counseling. I went to see a psychiatrist who I saw for 2 years. And then I saw another psychiatrist for another 3.5 years. You see, with this nature of injury, there isn't one part of your life, not one, that isn't affected in some debilitating fashion. Familial, recreational, spiritual, financial, professional, you name it. I mentioned earlier about how everything was reset. It's a complete start over. But there was so much emotion to process and unpack and work through. And that treatment was necessary, and if I had which I would never want to do, but if I was to coach anybody going through this kind of injury, I'd say make sure you plug yourself into a mental health counselor right away. There was a book that was given to me that sat on my dining room table for about 9 months, and I finally picked it up. And the book was called Full Catastrophe Living by an author named John Kabat-Zinn. I didn't read the whole book, but I did read some excerpts from it. And I'll tell you what my takeaways were. I learned about this word called mindfulness. I'm sure that everybody's got a different or a slightly different interpretation of it. I'll tell you what it means to me. For me, it means being more in the moment, slowing things down, really paying attention to your senses, visualization. I visualize all the time. I make pictures in my head. I form images of things that I want to accomplish and do. You see, your brain is an incredibly powerful part of you. And you'll see as we go through some of these other slides in the deck, some of the things that I've been able to accomplish over time. From where I started, this is all I could do. And the progression that's happened since then. One of my very first goals was I wanted to be able to get my hands to function again, because being able to have hand function back again opens up so much of your life. Do you think that putting your thumb and forefinger together is like easy? Sure. You never think about it. Clap your hands, make a fist, no big deal. When you're neurologically impaired, it's a big deal. And here I was in those early days and weeks in the hospital, just trying to get my thumb and forefinger to touch. And finally I did. And then I could apply pressure to them. And then I could apply enough pressure that I could actually hold something in it. And then my next goal was to be be able to try and touch my middle finger. And now we're talking months. And then it was my ring finger. Years. And now we're talking my pinky. 5 years. Those little goals, seemingly benign, innocuous goals, became little victories. And those victories grew. And so did the goals grow, and my confidence grew. And now I can do this on both sides, and I can even do it with my eyes closed. Like this, put my fingers up like this. Clasp my hands together. You can see some deformities in my fingers, but they still function. When I first tried to do this in the hospital, my hands were just flopping like this. And that progression of little goals and little victories was additive and cumulative. And the goals got bigger, and the victories got bigger. Today, I got bone anchors. I got issues. I got residual deficits that I have to deal with. You may look at me right now and go, quadriplegic? Are you kidding me? Yes, I do have issues. My whole waist level functions are all compromised. Sexually, bladder, bowel, they're all compromised. You might not know this, but I'm wearing a diaper today. I don't really particularly like to wear them, but I do have accidents. Yes, I do have to deal with incontinence. And there's other residual deficits I have to deal with. My balance is very precarious. Whenever I have to try and walk, it's like walking on a balance beam with my eyes partially closed. I could fall at any time. Stub my toe. I've fallen probably 3 dozen times. And when I fall, it's just not like sitting down. When I fall, it's like timber. Just boom. Straight. And it hurts. Fortunately, it hasn't been so traumatic that I had to go back to the hospital. I deal with chronic pain. I hurt right now. My middle back. It's like I got a knife right in the middle of it. When I stand, it hurts. My feet hurt. My body feels like it weighs thousands of pounds when I stand. Why? Errant nerve signals telling my body to hurt. When I'm standing upright, it feels like I got a harness buckled right around my waist and it's just yanking up through my waist. How do I deal with it? Early on, they had me on opiates. Oxycodone, methadone, that stuff did a dance on my system. And I only did it for a few months, and I told my doc, I don't care how much pain I got to deal with, get me off the stuff. I'll take NSAIDs, ibuprofen, but I'm not taking anything more than that. I'll just suck it up and deal with it. Yes, there's Jamie's Pharmacy. I take quite a cocktail of medicines every day just to be able to do the day. And they're strong. Valium, Izanidine, Baclofen, these are all muscle relaxants. Neurontin. Some people, if they just take one of those, it would put them right to sleep. Fortunately, I've been able to adapt and be able to meter and modulate my day so that I can function. I hate medicines. I wish I didn't have to take them. But that's one of the life adjustments I had to make. I'm going to show you a video clip of another issue that I deal with. These are extensor cramps that I deal with at night, and they're violent. They come in different shapes and forms. This looks more like an epileptic seizure, and it can be triggered by seemingly benign movements like pulling the sheets off me. What causes these? Being immobile. The antidote is movement. Yes, I have these every night. I have terrible sleep. I'm up and down every hour to an hour and a half. If I get 6 hours of aggregate sleep, I can do the day. Sometimes my body contorts in such violent positions and constricts like this, or my wrist will pull back so hard it's yanking on the tendons, or my leg will stick out so hard it's cramping my hip. How do I get through it? It's like sucking the wind out of me. It's like having your chest punched so hard you can't even breathe. And so I'm trying to get air back in my lungs to get the extensive cramps to quiesce. But here's the thing. Yes, I got residual deficits I have to deal with. I've got headwinds. I've got forces working against me. But they will not derail the direction I'm going to get independent. I won't let it. They will not define me. I control it. It doesn't control me. I control it. How I respond to it. Yeah, I got dealt a bad hand. I got dealt a bad hand. But I don't see myself as a victim. I don't feel sorry for myself. I don't pity myself. It doesn't mean that there's not more good hands to play, because there are. You will face adversity in your life. There's people out there that are dealing with injuries, adversities, diseases, or whatever. I don't have a monopoly on this difficulty. Everybody's dealing with something, or knows somebody that's dealing with something. But I'm going to play the hands that I still have to play and make the most of what I can do. Not focus on the things that I can't. I'm not going to let that be a boat anchor that I have to drag behind me. I'm going to focus on the things that I can do. I'm going to tell you a little quick anecdote of a story. I was on a walk back about 2.5 years post-injury. Same route that I'd walked for quite a while. And this FedEx truck pulls up past me, pulls off to the side of the road. This gentleman gets out of the truck, walks across the street, and starts walking towards me. And I start like getting anxious and freaked out a little bit. When my body gets anxious, it just gets stiff as a board. I can't move. And so I stopped. And he walked up to me, puts out his hand, says, "Hey, I'm Mike." I introduced myself. And he says, "You know, Jamie, I've been driving this route for years, and I've seen you out here walking. Wind, rain, nice days, and I can tell you're dealing with something. And I can see the progress that you've been making. I don't need to know what you're dealing with. I just wanted to tell you that I really admire your persistence, your perseverance, to overcome whatever it is that you're dealing with." And I just started crying. I was so taken by the fact that this gentleman would take his time out of his route to get out of his truck and come over and express his appreciation. And I told my psychotherapist about that. And she said, "You know, Jamie, you offered that man something." "Oh, what was that?" "You offered him hope." You see, Jamie, this is my therapist talking, you have no idea what impact you might be having on people's lives. In a manner of speaking, yes, physically I'm on stage right now, but I would argue and contend that all of you, all of us, are on stage all the time. People are watching, people are observing, people are forming impressions. You may be having an impact on somebody's life and not even know it either. And when she pointed that out to me, it was really a profound statement that I could be making a difference in somebody's life and not know that. So what's going on today? I should do a time check here, sorry. Okay. I'm going to break my recovery down into two segments. The first 3 years and the next 7 years. In the first 3 years, I was largely just trying to get some foundation of recovery back. And so I worked with physical therapists, occupational therapists, pool therapists. And at the end of 3 years, my therapist had said, you know, we pretty much maxed out with you. Why don't you go join a gym? You have the motivation. Go do what you need to do with your exercises. And if you need to come back and see me, come back. So I joined the gym. And I got reconnected with an old friend of mine. And I'm going to read you one passage from the book. I'm going to the next slide. So the gentleman, okay. What he has me doing here is a compound exercise. Just fast forwarded before I had a chance to set the context, but that's okay, I'll come back. So you have me have my legs up, pitching the ball, he's sitting on the ball, and I'm doing a reverse tricep. And believe me, this did not happen in year 3, year 4, year 5 post-injury. This is like 2 years ago that we worked up to this. But what I wanted to do was set some context for how I got reconnected with my old friend Sam. Sam was a great squash player. We used to compete and have great matches together. And when he saw me back in the gym, he came up to me and he goes, "What's going on? I haven't seen you in a long time." Because I had been away from the gym for quite a while. And I told him my story, and he offered, he said, "Oh, would you like to work out with me?" I said, "Sure. I won't charge you anything." Little did I know what I was signing up for. So to give you a baseline of where I started, I'm going to read you this quick passage that runs about 2 or 3 minutes. To provide a sense of where I was starting from, Sam had me lie on my back on the weight room floor. Once I was in a complete supine position, he asked me to raise my right leg. I said, "Don't bother asking me to do this because I know I can't." Undeterred, he said again, "Squeeze your butt muscles together, pull your belly button into the floor, and lift your right leg." I couldn't do it. I said, "See, I told you, I don't have the strength." So he got on his knees next to me, took his hand, and he jabs his fingers right into the base of my sternum. Jams them right here. And he kept them there and he said, "Now tighten those muscles where my hand is so I can feel it. And lift your right leg off the ground." I couldn't do it. So sensing some impatience, he takes both his hands and he jabs them right into my lower abdomen. He held them there and he implored, "Now do it!" I said, "Man, you're pissing me off." "Good," he said. "That's what I want to hear. Now do it." So with all I can muster, I jammed my lower back into the floor, tightened my butt muscles, squeezed my inner thighs with what limited feeling I had, and miraculously raised my right leg an inch or two off the ground and then put it down back into a resting position. "See," he said, "I knew you could do it. Now repeat it. This time with your left leg. And this time go higher than what you did with your right leg." So his hands are still jammed into my abdomen. Slowly my left leg rose a little bit off the ground, eventually reaching a couple of inches. And then it quickly collapsed back down to the ground. I was astonished. It was a very surreal experience because my upper body felt totally disconnected from my lower half. Sam would give me these instructions, but neurologically, the signals weren't getting through from my head to my lower extremities. This is where neuroplasticity comes into play. My body is physically impaired, and to do what I used to do without thinking now requires intense mental focus. The brain has an innate ability to reorganize itself. Knowing that my spinal cord is damaged with 6 out of 8 traffic lanes permanently blocked, the brain's plasticity kicks in to figure out how to reorganize and create new routes, or new circuits, if you will, around those damaged lanes to accomplish its objectives. I had my baseline. My core was dreadfully weak, but at least I had a starting point. This was the process we followed with countless exercises, establishing baselines on everything from push-ups, pull-ups, sit-ups, and a host of other exercises. And I remember a very pivotal moment early on in our working together when I said to him, "Look, Sam, when I tell you enough's enough, enough's enough, and you got to trust me." Sam responded, "No, Jamie, you need to learn to trust yourself." His words stopped me in my tracks. Sam was absolutely right. The single biggest impediment to making further progress was a lack of trust in myself. I was so scared of doing something that might cause an injury and set me back. I didn't want to encounter crash number 3. I did not want to create or repeat that terrifying experience. Fear was what was holding me back. What Sam did for me was life-changing. Sam was hard. He never looked at me as impaired. He said, "If you're going to work out with me, you're going to do what I do." And I used to whine about it the first few months that we worked together. I'd explain, "Oh, Sam, I can't do this because my hand starts vibrating." Or, "Sam, I can't do this because," and it was excuse after excuse. And finally I got the message from him, and it was like, "I don't care about your excuses, just do the doggone exercise." He helped me reveal capabilities I didn't think that I had. Capabilities that were dormant, asleep. He helped unearth them. And he helped me reveal them. And that exercise you just saw, I mean, the work up to that took many, many years. But that's where he took me. Challenged me. And the things that I've been able to accomplish since then, I give him all the credit. Sure, I did the work. He didn't do the work for me. But he was my guidepost through this whole thing. We're doing okay? We'll do, this was taken this past summer. We're doing pull-ups. I got to the point where I was actually able to pull-ups.
Like almost like a jungle gym. Okay, so here we go.
I haven't been able to do pull-ups since I graduated from college. And these are places that he took me. Let's go on. Play that real quick. One of my goals was to be able to walk down the stairs without holding the railing. And here I am. I've got to be very mindful of every step that I take because I can go down very quickly. And I have to use visual cues. I have to use visual cues to tell me where I am in space. There's a medical term, it's called proprioception. Proprioception is your body's recognition in space. So think about it this way. So let's say you're in an open hallway and you close your eyes and you walk 10 steps. your body knows where it is. Basically, you probably don't even think about it. For me, that's completely compromised. Another one of my goals was to be able to swing the golf club again. I didn't care whether I made contact or not. I just wanted to be able to swing the club and not fall down. And this was taken a couple of summers ago on a Father's Day. Again, I have nothing to brag about in terms of my golfing ability, even pre-injury. But I did make contact, and I didn't fall
How far
down.
did that go, Dad?
Straight, about 175.
Woo! Daddy!
Courtesy of my daughter. So here, this picture was taken a few years ago in New York. Another one of my goals was to be able to get a cruise shell again and to be able to row. I didn't care whether I could pull with any force or not. I just didn't want to do something errant that would cause the boat to go off kilter. So I'm in the number 3 seat. So in front of the boat is the bow. You got number 2, and I'm in the white shirt, number 3. And the school was very kind and dedicated a shell in my name, which was a tremendous honor. We got to do the inaugural row 2 years ago. It was so cool. Again, it was another one of those crying moments. We got into the dock and I'm sobbing along with my college mates at having checked off another huge milestone. Aspiration, perseverance, and in this case, I will add my word to it, prevailing, on my terms. Going to the next. I want to be able to get back on a bike again. This was taken a couple of years ago, and it was a ride around our neighborhood. It was about a 13-mile ride. I didn't want to be accommodated. You might remember my early comment. I just wanted to get independent. I didn't want accommodations. I didn't want to ride a 3-wheel bike or a 4-wheel bike. I wanted to ride a road cycle again. And I wanted to wear my bike shoes, and I wanted to be able to cleat in to the bike just like I had ridden before. Now this process, go ahead. Climbing the Alpine Rim, right? 21 years. Oh, and by the way, riding in the big ring. Oh.
How's the body feel?
Nothing makes me feel more alive than being out on the bike, having the air going through my helmet. My wife will never let me go on a bike unless she is trailing me in the car to block and tackle just in case, which is totally fine with me, but while it looks fairly easy, it's something I have to be super mindful of in terms of my balance, because my reaction speeds are very slow, so I have to be very careful about getting my feet out to put down to come to a stop. And I always pay a price. I mean, after I do a ride like that, I suffer terribly for the next several days. But I'm willing to pay the price because of what it gives back to me. It is so good for my soul. This picture was taken in Whistler Blackcomb up in Canada. This was shot back in December this past year. 7th Heaven Lift. And we're on our way up to Alpha. A ridiculously perfect day after the most intense snowfall I think I've ever experienced yesterday.
I am on 7th Heaven. Yeah, baby, yeah. And we start making our way back.
This movie I had played in my head for a decade. I had envisioned and choreographed all the raw materials of what this day would be like, how I would plant my poles, what the ski conditions would need to be like, what the weather would need to be like, who I was going to ski with, what runs was I going to take, how was I going to dose my medications correctly. what were going to be my contingency plans if something happened. All of this was choreographed and visualized in my head, and I played it over and over and over again until it could play by itself without any conscious prompting on my part. I can't watch the movie without it. Getting emotional, you can't see the tears behind the goggles. But to have a dream come true, this was a dream made true. I'm going to play a 5-minute clip. This was taken in the lodge. So just after I'd come down and was hugging my daughter, she shot this segment. And I want to play it for you because I think it really encapsulates the themes that I'm trying to share with you today. Go ahead. Turn it on.
Meet these events. This event. And, not completely losing when I was going down because emotionally so high and just trying to stay focused on my form and technique. At the same time, trying to slow it all down, just to, almost to the point that you just wish time to stand still and just absorb it all and to be mindful and be totally in the moment. And those are the things that go through my mind. Being thankful to be here with my loved ones. Means so much. When you kind of author and script something in your head over and over and over and over and over and over again, so you know exactly the moment, the weather conditions, the snow path, the wind, the terrain, how you're going to turn, what runs you're going to take, and so much more, and have that all choreographed in the greatest detail, and then playing it over and over and over and over again in my head. Someday I'm going to get there, someday I'm going to get to the top, someday it's all going to align, come together. And then to have it come together. You've probably seen the commercial about how dreams are made true. And this is a dream made true. I just couldn't be more grateful to be able to come back from an injury of this magnitude and to come back and do what I love most, and to do it with people that I love most. What can a person ask for? I mean, honestly, what can a person ask for more than that? To have all of that come together and be together. It's incredibly uplifting. It's nourishing for the soul, for my soul. I've said this again many times, moments like this is when I feel most alive. And I don't feel impaired. And, of course I know that I am at some level. But when I experience moments like this, particularly the last few turns we took before we came into the lodge, and I told you guys, I said, those last few turns almost felt like it was me. Again. And I'll treasure that moment. And perhaps, God willing, it'll happen again. And it just makes me feel so alive. It's like when I walk into the gym and I start exercising. I don't feel for the moments that I'm there that I'm disabled, although I know that I am, and I have to watch what I'm doing, and I have to be really careful in all the exercise. But the times when I'm sitting at home and I'm not moving, and I'm struggling to walk around just our own condo, or condition I will not allow to define me. It just will not define me. I define it. And that view is something that is really front and center of how I approach everything. It just won't define me. I will not let it control me. I will not let the pain and the spasticity and the extensor cramps and the poor sleep and all the other potential deficits that go with this injury. I am in control.
Yeah!
All right.
Choose to win!
Choose to win. Exactly.
When I talk about control, sure, there's things that happen in life that you don't have control over. I didn't choose to suffer a catastrophic injury that day. But I am in control of how I think. I am in control of how I feel. Nobody controls that. I do. Nobody sets goals for me. I set those goals. I control that. I control how hard I'm going to work. Those are my choices. Nobody makes those for me. I make those choices. I authored the book, Will Your Way Back, and published last February. I wrote the book because I wanted to share what it's like to deal with spinal cord injury and to reach and hopefully touch people's lives in a meaningful way that are facing any kind of life adversity. It doesn't have to be just in the domain of spinal cord injury. It could be anything that somebody's dealing with, some kind of life adversity. And it's written in a very raw, open, vulnerable way, in the way that I've presented today. A lot of the stories that we talked about, or that I've talked about today, are in the book, but there's a lot more in the book. Yes, this injury is cruel and relentless. It's hard to get up every day. Getting out of bed in the morning, people have asked me in the past, what gets you up every day? What gets me up every day is the opportunity to reach and touch and hopefully impact people's lives in some positive, useful way. There's things that I write about in this book and that I've talked about today that 20 years ago I would have never talked about in a million years. Do I want to tell people I'm wearing a diaper? Do I like telling people that I'm incontinent? But that's who I am. That's Jamie. That's authentic. It's real. It's vulnerable. The veneer doesn't matter anymore. I don't have to be something, I don't have to present myself as something that I'm not. This is who I am. And that's the backbone and the messaging of Will Your Way Back. So, I have a few classmates that I want to acknowledge and recognize that are here. The class of 75. Just pass through these real quick. These are taken from our yearbook. I won't ask you to stand up if you don't want to. an aspiration. Yes, we all are going to face adversity. Perhaps you're facing an adversity now. Maybe it's an adversity you're going to face on the sports field. Maybe it's an adversity you're going to face in a relationship. Maybe it's going to be a physical adversity. Maybe it's going to be something in your future profession. You're going to face curveballs that get thrown at you. The question to ask yourself is how are you going to deal with it? Which way are you going to go when you are faced with adversity? You going to give in? You going to succumb? Let it win and defeat you? Or are you going to choose to fight the good fight? And make it happen. Give it everything you've got. So what is aspirational in your life? What is something you want to strive for, reach for, achieve, accomplish? What do you choose? And after you determine what that is, begin the process of making that movie. Visualize what achieving that choice or goal or aspiration is. Choreograph it. Put all the raw materials together and make that movie. And then begin to repeat it and play it over and over and over again in your head. And I submit to you that if you do this with unwavering commitment, determination, resilience, and grit, that however difficult it may be, how daunting, seemingly impossible this might be, can actually happen. Choose, aspire, persevere, and prevail. Thank you all for joining me this morning. It's a great question. I exercise 5 times a week. I'm up at 3:30 in the morning. I get to the gym at 5 a.m. after the medications have had a chance to take effect. I work out until about 8 o'clock, and then I go to work. Those 2 hours after I work out are the best 2 hours of my day. Why? Endorphins. It is magical. There is no better analgesic, no better painkiller that I take, nothing that improves my mental outlook and well-being than just the release of endorphins in my system. And the pain modulates a little bit, and I work out just to get that feeling. Sure, it improves my physicality. Sure, it improves my mental outlook. But to get just some modicum of relief from pain is a great gift and blessing. Thanks for the question. Yes?
Do you believe in God?
Thank you for the question. I don't know if everybody heard it. Do I believe in God? Here's what I believe. I believe that let me back up a second. I'm not an overly spiritual person, but I will say this. I do believe that there is some sort of universal energy force out there. Some might call it a God force. Some might call it, my way of thinking, I think of it as a Jedi force, a force for good. A force that we can tap into. Some might say they can tap into it through prayer. But I believe that that energy is out there. And I'll give you a quick anecdote, which I didn't speak to in the presentation. Very early on in my recovery, I formed this picture in my head. And I pictured this light beam of energy coming out from the heavens and just targeting that lesion you saw on my back of my neck. And when I'd be stretching, I would just form this picture of it dissipating, dissolving that lesion in my neck, just like the morning sun would burn off the morning clouds. Now, I've never had a follow-up MRI to see whether that's ever changed the lesion or not. That doesn't matter. It's the picture that I hold in my head of that healing energy coming from some kind of universal energy force that I think is available to all. That would be my response to that. Thank you. Sure.
I remember in September 1971, when you and I had just started on this new freshman, and we were sitting in Mr. Hitchcock's English class. It was right inside the Darrow archway. And I remember looking around the room and thinking who these kids were, where they came from, and just a little bit about them.
Yep.
And as I look at you here, as I look at your face sitting in that ski lodge, I have a tremendous amount of respect and had no idea that you possess such strength of character. Really, I remember sitting, looking across the classroom at you. My question is, you've been 10 years down this road. Where do you see yourself going for the next several years? What are some of your goals?
Thanks for the question, Tim, and thanks for the very kind words. Where to from here? Oh, I have lots of goals. I have tons of physicality goals. Every time I hit a particular benchmark, I want to raise the bar and go to the next benchmark. I'm a data junkie. So I'm always following metrics in terms of number of pull-ups, how long I can spin on a spin bike, what kind of wattage I can generate. There's goals I have of places that I want to go, things I want to do. I want to be able to try and ice skate again. I loved playing hockey when I was here. I was a figure skater before I came here. I'd love to be able to get back on skates again. That's a goal. But I have other more altruistic goals as well. I'll tell you a little quick story that happened this past summer. I was at a reunion at my Aunt Augusta's home in Dublin, New Hampshire. And my cousin, Roberta, asked me a very direct question. She goes, when are you going to talk to the veterans? I said, well, it's in my mind. I do want to do it. I just haven't reached out to the group yet. She goes, you know, Jamie, you can be saving lives right now. You could be saving lives right now with your message. You've been through it. You've been through catastrophic injury. You're dealing with it today. You've dealt with post-traumatic stress disorder. What are you waiting for? I get it. I get it. I'd like to be able to influence the effective medical specialties in this space. Practitioners, physicians, orthopedic types, because I think the messaging that they're giving patients oftentimes is putting them in a box. Remember I said that most recovery, that the messaging I got very early on was that most recovery occurs in the first, couple of years and then plateaus? I would like to be able to share the message that recovery doesn't stop after 2 years. I can say with unequivocal certainty that I have had more recovery in the last 7 years than I had in the first 3 years by a wide margin. Boy, it's got a lot of practitioners scratching their heads wondering, well, how do we do it? I'm not an aberration. There are other people out there that I've had the pleasure of meeting along in this journey that have had very strong recoveries as well. But we're outliers. medical conferences, I've spoken at 2, to be able to maybe broaden their perspective and also the kind of messaging that they give their patients. You see, my doctor was a gift when he said to me, Jamie, you need to choose. Get independent. And that became my vexity. That became my focus. That became my aspiration. More patients need to hear that from their physicians. Not that they're, oh, we get you into a wheelchair and then we're done with you. There's way more going on in terms of the brain's innate ability to reorganize and adapt. And that can be leveraged if you feed your brain that neuroplasticity I talked about. If you feed that right, and I don't mean just with diet, I mean with the way you think. What do you visualize? What pictures in your head? How do you talk to yourself? All those kinds of things can play a huge part in recovery, and that's the kind of messaging I'd like to be able to share with a broader audience of healthcare practitioners. So thank you for the question, Tim. David.
The visualization, I think that it's a lot more powerful than just one user's mind. I think that's a material impact on your practice. And so I would say, can't talk really enough about that. How that can have a material impact on the
Yeah, so David was saying about the power of visualization and that it can have a much broader impact on your reality and how you function in the world. And I couldn't agree with you more. Any other questions?
Jamie, you are the ultimate perfect example of what I'm out of this school. And we haven't faced some kind of big adversity in our lives yet. At some point we will have to. And remember when we exit, because it's a different thing, truly. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Peter.
I'd like to stick around and ask a question. I'm sure Jacob will stick around. I echo what everybody said, and saying thank you so much for sharing your story. We're all going to face some storms in our lives, and now we have someone that actually has done the impossible for the doctors. So thank you so much for sharing that. Before we do go, I know Mr. Deckers wanted to make an announcement. If there's other announcements, we can make those at this time. Mr. Deckers.
Just real quick, if you're checking out when we get into 5.5, or you got a Facebook page there, I'll be there this time, okay, so you guys can check out.
Okay,